I used to think life was a straight line, a ladder you climb. But what happens when that ladder is kicked out from under you, and you find yourself in a freefall? My fall ended in a tiny, cramped apartment, with nothing but boxes of a life I no longer recognized. I was sorting through an old wallet, about to throw it away, when a piece of paper fell out. Faded receipt. On the back, 7 words were handwritten in neat cursive. Come back when you're ready to start over. I'd never heard of the cafe. I had no memory of being there. But I knew one thing. I was ready. I went. And the man behind the counter, he looked at me as if I was an old friend, and he said, I was wondering when you'd come. My old life ended the day I lost my job. My new one began the day I found that receipt. Music sedicit menguit dan menjadi inspiratif. If you've ever felt lost, or wondered if there's a second chance waiting for you in a place you least expect, this story is for you. We are Inspiration Seeker, and we believe everyone has a story of transformation. To help us keep finding them, please hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and comment below. What's the most mysterious message you've ever found? My name is David Miller. 3 months ago, that name meant something. It meant the corner office on the 54th floor of the Mercer Building, with a glass wall overlooking the Manhattan skyline. It meant a 7-figure bonus, a high-performance sports car I barely drove, and a reservation at any restaurant I wanted, just by dropping my name. I wasn't just an analyst on Wall Street. I was the analyst. I was fast, I was precise, and I was arrogant. I saw the market as a game I was built to win, and I saw people as assets or liabilities. I didn't make friends. I made connections. I didn't take advice. I gave orders. I was 32 years old, and I genuinely believed the rules of gravity, of consequence. They just didn't apply to me. But gravity always wins. It was a Tuesday, a bad trade. I had gotten greedy, leveraged a position I knew was volatile. I ignored the red flags from my junior team. I was so sure I could outsmart the dip. I didn't just lose. I vaporized 9 figures of client money before the lunch rush. It was a catastrophic, career-ending implosion. I was escorted out of the building by security before my coffee even got cold. The professional fall was immediate. The personal one, that one was slower and it cut deeper. My fiancée, Ashley, was part of the lifestyle. She loved the penthouse parties, the gallery openings, the Hamptons weekends. She loved David Miller, the success. She had very little patience for David Miller, the failure. A week after I was fired, she was gone. And just to twist the knife, she was gone with Mark Harrison, the one rival I could never stand, the one man I'd spent 3 years trying to professionally bury. He picked up the scraps of my career, and now he had the woman who was supposed to be my wife. So this is the bottom. It's not some dramatic scene from a movie. It's quiet. It's the smell of stale pizza and mildew in a 4th-floor walk-up studio in Queens. It's the constant, low-level hum of dread every time my phone buzzes, knowing it's another creditor. I was surrounded by cardboard boxes filled with designer suits I'd never wear again. I wasn't just broke. I was erased. A ghost haunted by the man I used to be. You know, there's a strange kind of inventory you take when your life implodes. You're no longer sorting things to keep or to store. You're sorting them into things to sell and things to throw away. I was on my last box. This one was just junk. Old keycards, dead batteries, dried-up pens, the meaningless debris of a life lived at high speed. My hands were grimy. The air in the studio was thick and still. I was sitting on the floor, ready to just tape the box shut and label it trash, when my fingers brushed against worn leather. It was an old bifold wallet. Not my sleek, minimalist Wall Street one, but a slightly thicker, softer one I hadn't used in at least a year. I don't even know why I kept it. I flipped it open, expecting nothing. Maybe a few expired credit cards or a crumpled 20. Instead, there was only one thing inside a forgotten pocket. A single folded receipt. It was faded, the blue ink turning purple, the paper thin and soft from time. The header read, "The Phoenix Café." I stared at the name, the Phoenix Café. I racked my brain. I'd spent a decade memorizing the name of every important client, every high-end restaurant, every exclusive club in New York City. I prided myself on my memory. But this? Nothing. I had zero recollection of this place. It wasn't a chain. It didn't sound expensive. It didn't exist in my world. I was about to toss it, dismissing it as just another piece of life static, when I felt it. There was writing on the back. Not printed, but handwritten. The ink was black, a sharp, elegant cursive that felt both personal and deliberate. It said, "Come back when you're ready to start over." I read the line once, then a second time, and a third. This wasn't a marketing gimmick. This wasn't an ad. It was a message. My heart, which I was pretty sure had been beating at a funeral pace for 3 months, gave an odd, sharp jolt. It wasn't hope. Hope was a luxury I couldn't afford. It was curiosity, a deep, unsettling ripple in the stagnant pond of my depression. In a life that had become painfully, predictably awful, filled with legal notices and angry voicemails, this receipt was the one thing that made no sense at all. It was an error in the code. And as a man who used to live by data, it was the one anomaly I couldn't ignore. That night, I did something I hadn't done in months. I went to sleep with a purpose. Not a grand purpose like closing a merger, but a small, sharp one. Find this cafe. I unfolded the receipt again under the weak bulb of my kitchen light. The address was printed at the bottom, a street in Greenwich Village. Of course, the Village. In my old life, I'd dismissed that entire part of downtown. To me, it was a maze of inefficient, non-grid streets, full of aimless tourists and dusty, unprofitable shops. If I ever had to go there for a dinner, I'd have a car service wait for me, impatient to get back uptown, back to the real New York, the one that ran on spreadsheets and ambition. The next morning, I swiped a nearly empty Metro card and took the E-train from Queens. I felt like a tourist in my own city. I wasn't wearing a custom-tailored suit. I was in old jeans and a jacket that was too thin for the sharp October air. I wasn't checking stock tickers on my phone. I was just watching the faces of the people around me, wondering if any of them were also on their way to answer a riddle. I got off at West 4th Street and stepped out. The air was different here, quieter. It smelled like old books and roasting coffee. I followed the address on my phone, turning off the main avenue onto a narrow, cobblestone street I must have passed 100 times without ever truly seeing. And there it was. It wasn't a sleek, modern glass and steel storefront. It was old. The sign was wooden, hand-carved, the gold leaf lettering of the Phoenix Café, flaking in a way that looked dignified, not derelict. It was nestled between 2 other buildings that seemed to be from another century. A dusty antique bookstore on the left, and a jazz club on the right with a faded poster in the window. The cafe itself was red brick, with large, clean windows. From the outside, I could see it was warm, bathed in a soft, amber light. It wasn't empty, but it wasn't packed. It looked content. I stood there for a full minute. My mind was racing, trying to find the angle. Was this a prank? A mistake? Was I walking into some kind of setup? But then, who would bother? I was a nobody. I had nothing left to take. I looked down at the receipt in my hand one last time. Come back when you're ready to start over. Taking a breath, I pushed open the heavy wooden door. A small brass bell chimed softly overhead, announcing my arrival. The moment I stepped inside, the city noise, the sirens, the traffic, the distant arguments, just stopped. It was like closing a soundproof door. The air inside was thick and warm, and it smelled incredible. Not just of coffee, though that was certainly there, dark and rich. It smelled like cinnamon and old wood, and, I don't know, maybe baked bread? It was the complete opposite of the sterile, filtered air of my old office, which smelled only of industrial cleaner and faint, expensive cologne. The place was lit by low-hanging amber lamps. The walls were lined with bookshelves, crammed with mismatched books. A few people were scattered at the small wooden tables. An old woman knitting, 2 students quietly debating over a chessboard, a man in the corner reading a thick novel. No one was on a laptop. No one was barking orders into a phone. It was peaceful, disturbingly peaceful. My eyes landed on the man behind the counter. He was older, maybe in his late 60s, with a full head of silver hair and a neatly trimmed white beard. He was wearing a simple, clean apron, and he was methodically polishing a glass mug with a white cloth, holding it up to the light. He didn't look up when I came in, not immediately. I walked toward the counter, my footsteps echoing slightly on the wooden floor. I felt incredibly out of place, like a wolf walking into a sheep pen. I clutched the faded receipt in my hand like it was a passport. What was I supposed to say? "Hi, I found your weird, cryptic note." I cleared my throat as I reached the counter. The man stopped polishing. He slowly placed the mug down, turned his head, and looked directly at me. His eyes were bright, a clear, pale blue, and they held no surprise. None. He looked at me, knowingly. A slow, gentle smile spread across his face. "Mr. Miller," he said. His voice was calm, a pleasant baritone with a slight, unplaceable accent. "We've been waiting for you." I froze. My blood ran cold, then hot. Every cynical Wall Street instinct screamed trap. How do you know my name?" I managed to get out, my voice sounding harsher than I intended. "I've never been here. Who are you?" He just chuckled, a soft sound, like rustling leaves. He gestured to the receipt I was practically crushing in my fist. "That receipt is an invitation, David. We don't send them out by accident." He reached for a coffee pot behind him. "And I'm Elias. You've had a long journey to get here." He pulled a heavy ceramic mug from a shelf. "You look like a man who could finally use a real cup of coffee." I just stared at him. "Waiting for me? What is this? Some kind of cult? How did you get my name? And how did this receipt end up in my wallet?" The questions came out in a rapid-fire burst, my old, aggressive negotiation tactics resurfacing. Elias simply pushed the steaming mug of black coffee across the polished wooden counter. It smelled perfect. Exactly how I used to take it, a specific single-origin bean I paid a fortune to import. "You won't find the answers you're looking for in a panic, Mr. Miller," he said, his voice maddeningly calm. "Drink. You look like you're running on fumes." I wanted to throw the mug back at him. I wanted to demand answers, but I was so tired, and the smell of the coffee was a genuine comfort. I took a sip. It was the best coffee I'd had in my entire life. It was a small, warm moment of perfection in a world that had become relentlessly cold and imperfect. I don't have any money," I admitted, the words tasting like ash. "I can't pay for this." "That invitation," Elias said, tapping a finger on the receipt I'd placed on the counter, "is not for a free coffee. It's for an opportunity. You said it yourself, you're ready to start over. The question is, are you willing to start from the beginning?" "What does that mean? A loan? An investment?" "I have nothing to offer," I said flatly. Elias smiled, a small, unreadable expression. He turned and pointed with his head toward a set of swinging doors at the back. "Our dishwasher quit yesterday. The sink is full. The kitchen needs a porter. Pays minimum wage cash at the end of each shift. It's yours if you want it." I felt the blood rush to my face. A dishwasher. He was offering me David Miller, the man who once managed $1 billion portfolio, the man who wore $4,000 suits, a job, scrubbing plates. The humiliation was a physical thing, a hot, choking pressure in my chest. I wanted to laugh in his face, to tell him exactly who I was. But then, the reality of my situation crashed back in. Who was I? I was a guy with $43 in his bank account. I was a guy whose rent was due in 3 days. I was a guy who hadn't had a real meal in a week. My arrogance, my pride. What had they gotten me? They were useless currency here. I looked from Elias's calm, expectant face to the swinging doors, and then back again. I was trapped. "Where?" I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Do I find the apron? If you want to know the true definition of humility, spend 8 hours with your hands plunged in greasy, scalding water." That first shift was the longest 8 hours of my life. The kitchen was a different world from the calm cafe. It was hot, loud, and chaotic. Steam billowed from the industrial dishwasher, pots and pans clanged, and there was a constant urgent shouting I couldn't understand. My hands, which were accustomed to the smooth glide of a keyboard and the weight of a heavy stock pen, were not built for this. Within an hour, they were red, raw, and aching. My back, used to a $5,000 ergonomic chair, was screaming. Every fiber of my being wanted to rip off the damp, disgusting apron and storm out. I was David Miller. I didn't do this. But every time I looked at my reflection in the back of a greasy steel tray, I saw the truth. I was the guy who had to do this. It was around the lunch rush when I first met Maya. She burst through the swinging doors like a small hurricane, her dark hair tied up in a colorful bandana, her chef's jacket dusted with flour. She was carrying a massive tray of something that smelled like heaven. She stopped dead when she saw me fumbling with the industrial sprayer, soaking myself and the floor. She didn't look impressed. "Hey, Wall Street, you're supposed to be washing those, not giving them a bath. And you're breaking the rhythm. Move." I bristled. "It's my first day. And who are you?" "I'm Maya. I'm the one who actually makes things people want to buy here," she snapped, not unkindly, but with zero patience. "Elias may have a soft spot for strays, but I don't. You're either here to work or you're just scenery. Right now, you're bad scenery." She slid the tray of pastries onto a rack and was gone, back through the doors without a second glance. My old self would have had her fired. My new self just stood there dripping and felt small. My struggle wasn't just with the dishes. It was with a different kind of rival. Just as my shift was ending, I was wiping down a table in the main room when the bell on the door chimed. But this time it sounded different, colder. A man in a brutally expensive razor-sharp suit walked in. He looked like my old colleagues. He had that same dead-eyed, predatory stillness. He didn't look at the menu. He just stared at the architecture, at the walls, as if mentally tearing them down. Elias approached him. "Mr. Thompson, you're early." Just admiring the potential Elias. "The man," Thompson said, his voice smooth and cold. "This place has history, but history doesn't pay the bills. And as you know, the bank is very interested in my offer. You're running out of time." Elias just stood there, his hands clasped. "The community needs this place, Robert." "The community," Thompson sneered, "needs luxury condos, and I'm going to give it to them. Have your lawyers read the latest notice? We're moving." He glanced at me for half a second, dismissing me as part of the furniture, and left. The bell chimed again, leaving a pocket of cold silence in his wake. I didn't ask Elias about Thompson. I had spent a decade in a world of sharks, and I knew a predator when I saw one. I also knew a man in a weak negotiating position. Elias was in trouble, but my curiosity was still fixed on my own mystery. Why me? I kept my head down. I washed dishes. I mopped floors. I graduated to peeling potatoes and, eventually, to bussing tables. It was 2 weeks of grueling, mind-numbing, ego-crushing work. My hands started to callous over. My back stopped screaming and settled into a dull, constant ache. I was quiet, I was observant, and I was, for the first time in my life, invisible. One rainy afternoon, the cafe was slow. Elias asked me to fetch a new keg of cold brew coffee from the basement storeroom. The basement wasn't just a storeroom. It was a labyrinth of shelves, wine racks, and dusty boxes. As I was navigating my way back, I took a wrong turn and found myself in a small, dry, well-lit room I hadn't seen before. It looked more like an office than a cellar. It was filled with floor-to-ceiling shelves, but they weren't stocked with food. They were stocked with dozens of identical, leather-bound ledgers. My old instincts kicked in. I'm a man who understands ledgers. I pulled one down. The spine was labeled 1998. I opened it. The page was divided into 2 columns. On the left, a name, Arthur Jenkins. On the right, a brief, handwritten note. Lost his firm to embezzlement. Found sleeping at the Port Authority. Stapled to the bottom of the page was a receipt. A receipt from the Phoenix Café. I pulled down another book. 2005. Page after page of names. Maria Sanchez. Fled an abusive husband. Came to the city with $50. A receipt. Ben Carter. Medical discharge. Addicted to painkillers. A receipt. My breath caught in my chest. I scrambled to find the most recent ledger. The one for 2025. I flipped through the pages, and there, near the back, I saw it. David Miller. The note was brief. Public disgrace. Lost career and fortune in a single day. High-risk profile. Extreme arrogance. And stapled below it, a copy of the receipt I had found in my wallet. I was still holding the book when the light from the hallway was blocked. Elias was standing in the doorway. He wasn't angry. He just looked tired. I was looking for the cold brew, I stammered, feeling like a kid caught stealing. I know, he said, walking into the room. He ran a hand along the spine of one of the books. This is the real work of the cafe, David. It was started 100 years ago by a philanthropist who had lost everything himself. He believed that money couldn't fix a broken person, but purpose could. He looked at me, his blue eyes locking onto mine. We don't find people at random. We have spotters, friends of the cafe all over the city, social workers, cops, even doormen. They find people who are at the absolute bottom, people who have fallen so far, they've been forgotten. And then you, what? Give them a magic receipt? I asked, my voice laced with skepticism. And then, Elias said softly, we give them an invitation, an anonymous chance. We put the receipt somewhere they will, by chance, find it. We wait. Most people throw it away. They see it as trash. But some, a very few, are desperate enough or curious enough like you to see it as a lifeline. They're the ones who are truly ready to start over. Learning the cafe's secret changed everything. I was no longer just a dishwasher. I was one of them. I was a phoenix. I started looking at Maya, at the other quiet staff members, even at Elias, and wondering, what was their story? What ledger were they in? This wasn't just a job anymore. It was a sanctuary, and I had been invited in. That feeling of fragile belonging lasted exactly 3 days. It was a Friday morning, our busiest time. The cafe was full, the air humming with conversation and the hiss of the espresso machine. Maya was laughing at something one of the regulars said. I was running orders, my apron stained with coffee grounds, actually feeling useful. Then the bell on the door chimed, and just like before, a pocket of cold air entered with him. It was Mr. Thompson. This time he wasn't alone. He was flanked by 2 men in identical, cheap-looking suits, one of whom was carrying a briefcase. Thompson didn't bother to look around. He just strode directly to the counter where Elias was helping a customer. Elias, Thompson said, his voice loud enough to cut through the cafe's hum, silencing it. Our discussion is over. Elias calmly finished handing the customer her change. Robert, I told you, I am still exploring my options. No, Thompson said with a dismissive, cruel little laugh. You're not. Your options officially ran out this morning. The man with the briefcase stepped forward and slapped a thick, stapled set of documents onto the counter. It was a formal, court-ordered notice of eviction. You have 1 week, Thompson declared, his voice projecting to the entire room. 7 days. Then the marshals will be here to escort you and your charity cases off my property. A collective gasp went through the room. Maya dropped a tray of cups, the sound of smashing ceramic echoing in the sudden, dead silence. You can't do this, she whispered, her voice shaking with rage. Oh, I can, little girl. It's done, Thompson sneered. The bank has accepted my offer to buy the note. This building is mine. Enjoy your last week of playing make-believe. He turned to leave. I looked at Elias. The calm, steady man who had welcomed me was gone. In his place was a truly old man. His shoulders were slumped. He looked utterly defeated, staring at the legal papers as if they were a death warrant. He had built this entire world of second chances, but he had failed to secure his own. And as I looked at that eviction notice, at the smug look on Thompson's face, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Not despair, not humiliation. It was the old, cold, familiar fire. It was pure, analytical rage. Thompson had made one critical mistake. He assumed I was just a dishwasher. He had no idea he'd just declared war on David Miller. Thompson left and the cafe. It just died. The silence was heavy, broken only by the sound of Elias slowly sinking onto a stool, his head in his hands. Maya was silently crying, her hands clenched in her apron. I saw a sanctuary full of broken people who were about to be made homeless all over again. But me, I wasn't broken. I was awake. The fog of the last 3 months evaporated. This wasn't a street fight. This was a boardroom execution. And Thompson had just walked into my arena. I walked over to Maya, my hands still damp from the sink. "Elias's fight is over," I said, my voice quiet but sharp. "Ours is just beginning. I need your help." She looked at me, her eyes red. "Help? What can we do?" "He has the law. He has a lawyer," I countered. "He doesn't have me." That night, for the first time in my life, I missed my old Bloomberg terminal. But I didn't need it. I went to the main branch of the New York Public Library and, for 6 straight hours, I dived into a world I knew better than my own name. Public records, SEC filings, property deeds, and the tangled web of LLCs that shielded men like Thompson. I was no longer David, the dishwasher. I was David Miller, the analyst. And I was hunting. Thompson was sloppy. He was arrogant. He assumed no one would ever check his work. I found it at 3 a.m. He hadn't just bought the note from the bank. He had acquired it through a shell company that had simultaneously filed a false zoning complaint against the cafe, artificially devaluing the property so the bank would sell the debt for pennies on the dollar. It was wire fraud. It was racketeering. It was beautiful. I raced back to the cafe. Maya was there, scrubbing the floors with a vengeance, tears still streaming down her face. "He can't win," she was muttering. "He can't. He won't," I said, dropping the pile of printed documents on a table. "I've got the sword. Now I need the shield." "What are you talking about?" "This," I said, grabbing a napkin and a pen. "This place isn't just a charity. It's a business. Your pastries are underpriced. Your coffee is single origin, but you charge diner prices. We're not just going to save the cafe. We're going to make it profitable." For the next 4 days, we didn't sleep. I built a business plan, a real one. Spreadsheets, projections, cost-benefit analyses. Maya brought in community leaders, organized customer testimonials, and perfected a catering menu. We weren't just fighting an eviction. We were pitching a relaunch. We were going to show the bank that Elias wasn't a bad debt. He was an untapped asset. The community board meeting was held in a stuffy, wood-paneled room at the local library. It was packed. Thompson and his lawyers sat at the front, looking smug, like the deal was already done. Me, Elias, and Maya sat in the back, a small island of defiance. A representative from the bank was there, a woman with a weary, impartial expression. Thompson spoke first. He was smooth. He talked about urban renewal, progress, and fiscal responsibility. He painted the Phoenix Café as a failing, nostalgic relic that was dragging down the property values of the entire block. He had charts. He had graphs. It was a good performance. Then it was our turn. Elias was too tired to speak. Maya was too angry. So I stood up. I walked to the front, my hands stained with coffee, my shoes worn, but I was wearing the best shirt I had. I didn't look at Thompson. I looked at the bank representative. "Mr. Thompson is a brilliant developer," I began, my voice clear and steady, echoing in the quiet room. "But he is a terrible analyst. He's missed the single most valuable asset in this entire deal." Thompson smirked. "And what's that, dishwasher?" "Me," I said. "And her." I nodded to Maya. "And them." I gestured to the 24 community members who stood up with us. I laid down our business plan, the projections, the new revenue streams from catering, the community co-op model. I wasn't asking for a handout. I was presenting a superior investment. A voice called from the back. "I'd like to make the first investment." I turned. My blood froze. It was Ashley. She was standing there, alone, without Mark. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a complicated mix of pity and respect. "What you did to me was business," I told her once. "It wasn't personal." She looked at Thompson, then at me. "I'm pledging $50,000 to the cafe's revitalization fund as restitution for backing the wrong horse." Thompson's face went purple. "But that's just the business proposal," I continued, turning back to the bank rep, my heart hammering. "Now for the legal one." I dropped the second file on her table. The one detailing the shell company, the false zoning complaint, the wire fraud. Mr. Thompson didn't buy the note. He stole it, and I have the receipts to prove it. It was over in an instant. The bank rep's eyes went wide. Thompson's lawyer was already packing his briefcase. The bank didn't just restructure the loan. They tore it up and issued a new one to us. Today, the sign outside reads, "The Phoenix Community Café." It's louder. It's busier. Maya's kitchen has 2 new employees. Elias, he's sitting in the corner, reading a thick novel. For the first time in 30 years, just a customer. A little while ago, Elias found me at the counter, wiping it down. He handed me a clean, new apron. This one wasn't for a dishwasher. It was for a manager. Maya came out, brushed some flour off my cheek, and smiled. I looked around at the noise, the chaos, the life we had built from the ashes. I had come here looking to start over. I thought that meant getting my old life back. But as I looked at Maya, I realized the truth. That old life wasn't a life. It was just a ladder. This is a foundation.